Tonight, let your mind travel to a place that no longer exists, but once did, in every detail. Close your eyes. Release the weight of your day. Let your shoulders fall. Let your breathing slow. Whatever is waiting for you tomorrow, it can wait. Tonight, you are going somewhere else entirely. You are going to Alexandria, to the most magnificent city the ancient world had ever seen, to a time when the Nile was young and the world was wide, to an evening more than 2,000 years ago, when the air smelled of salt water and incense, and the stars above the Mediterranean burned like scattered gold. You are here simply to observe, simply to wander, simply to rest. There's nothing to remember tonight, nothing to hold on to, nothing to solve. Only this. Breathe in slowly and let Alexandria find you. The city comes into view gradually, the way all beautiful things should. You are standing at the edge of the royal harbor at the hour just before sunset. The sky is the color of pale copper, fading into the softest blue at the horizon. The Mediterranean stretches out before you, vast and impossibly still, like a sheet of hammered bronze. To your right, on the island of Pharos, stands the lighthouse. Even from here, you can see it clearly. A tower of white marble and pale limestone, rising nearly 400 feet into the evening air. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It stands the way all great things stand, with complete indifference to how extraordinary it is. The light at its peak has not yet been lit. There's still enough daylight for the harbor pilots, but soon the keeper will climb those long spiral stairs. The fire will be kindled, and its reflection will scatter across the water in long, trembling lines of orange and gold. Fishermen are bringing in the last of their catches. Their wooden boats knock softly against the docks. The nets are heavy. The men are tired in the good way, the way of people who have done exactly what they were meant to do today. Seabirds wheel overhead, but even they seem slower now. The evening is settling over Alexandria the way sleep settles over a tired mind, gradually, quietly, without announcement. Behind you, the city rises. Streets of white limestone, warm from a full day of sun, now cooling in the sea breeze. Columns of pale marble carved with lotus flowers and papyrus reeds. Date palms lining the Canopic Way, the great boulevard that runs the length of the city from east to west. Wide enough for 4 chariots to travel side by side. Quiet now. In the amber light, the markets are winding down. The bread sellers have packed their baskets. The perfume traders have sealed their alabaster jars. The sound of the city is changing. The daytime clatter of commerce fading into something softer. Voices from open windows. a child being called in from play, the low chime of a temple bell somewhere to the west. You walk east, toward the royal quarter. The street beneath your feet is smooth limestone, still holding the warmth of the afternoon. Small oil lamps are beginning to appear in doorways, their flames barely visible in the remaining daylight, but lit all the same. A small orange point of light in every threshold. The royal quarter rises ahead of you, its gardens visible above the pale walls, the dark feathering of palm trees, the silver green of olive branches, and the scent changes as you draw closer. Less salt air, more incense. Kifi, the sacred perfume of the Egyptian temples, drifting from the palace walls like slow, fragrant smoke. It smells of myrrh and honey, and something ancient and warm that you cannot quite name. It is the smell of a world that takes its rituals seriously, that believes in the power of beautiful things. The gates are open. The guards are there, tall, still, their bronze spear tips catching the last of the light. But they do not stop you. You are simply here to watch and to rest, and to let the evening unfold at its own pace. You walk through. The gardens are more beautiful than you imagined. Lotus pools, still and dark, reflect the copper sky above. Around their edges grow papyrus reeds, tall and straight, their feathery tops nodding in the sea breeze. A cat, black and possibly sleek, sits at the edge of one pool, watching the surface of the water with the complete serenity of an animal who has never once worried about anything. You watch it for a moment. Stone pathways wind between flowering shrubs. White jasmine, sweet rush, the small purple flowers of Syrian hyssop growing in low borders along the path. Everything is growing in the slow, unhurried way of things that have always been tended and always will be. The stone pathway is cool now, the warmth of the day held in the walls around you, but released from the ground, replaced by the soft chill of the Mediterranean evening. At the center of the garden, half shaded by the spread of a large sycamore fig tree, there's a chair, and in that chair, dressed in white linen so fine it moves in the breeze without sound, sits Cleopatra. She is not what you might have expected, not reclining on a throne, not surrounded by ceremony, not performing the role of a queen. She is simply sitting, her feet resting on a low cushion, a small scroll of papyrus open across her knee, reading in the last available light. One of her attendants stands nearby, holding a lamp, but she has waved it away for now. She prefers the natural light for as long as it lasts. She's young, perhaps 20 years old. Her dark hair is dressed simply this evening, pulled back and wrapped with a thin band of woven gold. No elaborate wig, no heavy crown, no eye paint, even. It was removed hours ago when the formal day was finished. Without it, she looks younger still. She turns a page. You find a place at the garden's edge, near the lotus pool, and you sit down on a low stone bench, still faintly warm from the afternoon sun. The jasmine is stronger here. The sound of the harbor is just audible beyond the palace walls. A low, rhythmic sound. The breathing of the sea. You are in no hurry. You settle back, and you watch the evening come in. The morning, before the sun had fully risen above Alexandria, the palace remained wrapped in the final, quiet moments of night. The darkness had not yet disappeared. It lingered softly in the corners of the room, along the bases of the columns, within the folds of linen curtains that hung motionless in the still air. Then, almost imperceptibly, the first light of dawn began to arrive. Not through clear glass, not in bright beams, but through windows carved from alabaster. Alabaster is a remarkable stone, neither fully solid nor truly transparent. It holds light within itself, transforms it, softens it. As the rising sun touched the outer surface of the stone, something extraordinary happened. The bright white light of morning changed. Its sharpness faded. Its brilliance became gentler, warmer. What entered the room was no longer the pale light of dawn. It had become amber, golden, the color of honey held up to the sun. The alabaster seemed almost alive. For a moment, the windows themselves appeared to glow from within. The light spread slowly across the chamber, touching the limestone floor first, then climbing the carved walls. The pale stone reflected the warmth back into the room, multiplying it. Every surface seemed softer beneath its touch. Every shadow became less certain. The darkness did not retreat suddenly. There is no dividing line between night and morning. Instead, the two seemed to coexist for a while, the golden light gradually weaving itself into the fading blue shadows. The corners of the room brightened little by little. Details that had been hidden during the night began to emerge. The smooth edge of a column, the gentle curve of an alabaster vase, the delicate patterns embroidered into linen cloth. Nothing appeared all at once. Everything revealed itself patiently, as though the palace wished to wake slowly. The warmth arrived just as gently. At first it was barely noticeable, only a slight change in the air, a subtle feeling upon the skin. Then, minute by minute, the room seemed to gather the sun's warmth and hold it. The coolness of night slowly gave way to comfort. The stone walls, which had rested in darkness for hours, now reflected a quiet glow. The chamber felt welcoming, protected, safe. Outside, the city of Alexandria was beginning to stir. Ships waited in the harbor. Birds circled above the water. Merchants prepared for another day. Yet Here, within these alabaster walls, time moved differently. The morning was in no hurry to arrive, and the night was in no hurry to leave. For a few precious moments, both existed together, a world suspended between darkness and light, between sleep and waking, between yesterday and whatever tomorrow might bring. And in that golden stillness, the palace seemed to breathe with the rising sun itself. As the golden light continued to spread through the palace, the morning ritual moved gently forward. In a nearby chamber, a limestone basin had been prepared long before dawn. Its pale surface had been polished smooth by years of careful use. The stone felt cool to the touch, quiet, ancient, a vessel designed not only for comfort, but for ceremony. The water within it reflected the amber light that filtered through the alabaster windows. Small ripples shimmered across the surface like liquid gold. Nearby stood several alabaster pitchers. Their pale walls seemed almost luminous in the morning glow. Within them was water scented with precious oils, lotus blossom, blue lily, fragrances deeply connected to the Nile and the rhythms of Egyptian life. The scent was delicate, fresh, softly floral, like a garden awakening beside the river at sunrise. One of the attendants lifted the first pitcher, without hurry, without a sound. She tilted it slowly. A clear stream of water emerged. For a moment, it hung in the air like glass. Then it descended into the basin below. The sound was gentle, a quiet cascade, meeting stone. A soft splash followed by a delicate echo that lingered for a few moments in the stillness of the chamber. The sound seemed larger because of the silence surrounding it. Every drop could be heard, every movement noticed. The water struck the smooth limestone and spread outward in widening circles. Ripples traveled slowly across the surface, touching the edges of the basin before returning once more toward the center. Another pitcher followed, then another, each stream creating its own pattern, its own rhythm. The room filled with the soothing sound of flowing water, not loud, not constant, only gentle intervals of movement separated by long moments of quiet. At first the water felt cool, refreshing, carrying with it the lingering freshness of the early morning, the kind of coolness that awakens the senses without disturbing the peace of the moment. As more water was added, its temperature gradually changed. Warm water from another vessel mixed with the cooler water already resting in the basin. Little by little, the chill faded. A gentle warmth began to spread through the stone vessel. Steam was barely visible, only the faintest suggestion of it rising into the amber light. The fragrance of lotus and blue lily drifted upward with the warmth. The scent mingled traces of incense. Together, they transformed the chamber into a place that felt removed from the outside world, a place untouched by noise, untouched by urgency. Outside, Alexandria continued to awaken, but here there was only water, stone, light, and silence. The surface of the basin gradually became still once more. The ripples grew smaller, the circles widened and disappeared, until the water returned to perfect calm, reflecting the golden ceiling above like a mirror. For a few quiet moments, nothing moved. The basin rested in complete stillness. The warm, scented water waiting patiently. The morning unfolding exactly as the surface of the water grew still once more. Another part of the morning ritual quietly began. Nearby, a small bronze vessel rested upon a low stone table. Within it lay a single charcoal disc, dark, silent, waiting. One of the attendants approached with calm and practiced movements. There was no rush, no unnecessary gesture, only the familiar rhythm of a ritual performed countless times before. She placed a small measure of kaifi upon the glowing charcoal. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The room remained perfectly still. Then the first thin curl of smoke appeared, delicate as a thread, almost weightless. It rose slowly into the quiet air, twisting gently as it climbed. The movement was so subtle that it seemed less like smoke and more like something alive. A soft gray ribbon drifting upward through the golden light of morning. Soon the fragrance followed, not all at once, but gradually, patiently, as though the scent wished to introduce itself before fully entering the room. The air remained motionless, undisturbed. There was no breeze to carry the aroma, no open window through which it could escape. Instead, the fragrance unfolded slowly in every direction, filling the chamber little by little, touching each corner, lingering among the stone columns, settling softly within the folds of linen curtains. Kefi was unlike any ordinary incense. Its scent was rich and layered. Sweet honey, warm resin, dried flowers, hints of cinnamon, a trace of earth after rain. Each breath seemed to reveal something new, something ancient, something familiar. Beyond the palace walls, the same ritual was taking place across Egypt, in temples beside the Nile, in sacred courtyards surrounded by towering columns, in quiet shrines where priests had welcomed the dawn for generations. At this very moment, throughout the kingdom, charcoal discs were glowing. Thin streams of fragrant smoke were rising toward painted ceilings and open skies. The scent of kaifi belonged to the morning. It was one of the first signs that a new day had begun. Within the royal palace, the meaning was much the same. The fragrance marked the beginning of official life. Soon, there would be visitors, messages, meetings, decisions. The responsibilities of a ruler would slowly awaken alongside the city itself. But not yet. For now, the incense transformed the chamber into a place suspended outside of time. The smoke continued its gentle journey upward. The golden light from the alabaster windows illuminated every delicate curve. For a few moments, the drifting ribbons of smoke seemed to dance within the morning sunlight, slowly, gracefully, without purpose or destination. The scent deepened, the room grew warmer, and a feeling of calm settled over everything. The stone walls, the quiet attendants, the still water resting within the limestone basin. Even the silence itself seemed softened by the fragrance. Outside Alexandria was beginning another day. Inside, the palace remained wrapped in peace. The incense drifted upward. The sunlight continued to grow, and the morning unfolded exactly as it always had. One gentle moment after another. As the last ribbons of incense drifted through the chamber, another familiar ritual quietly began. Upon a small table rested an alabaster palette. Its smooth surface had been worn by years of careful use. In the center lay a dark mixture prepared according to traditions older than memory itself. Finely ground galena, mixed with animal fat, slowly blended until it became a smooth black paste. The substance caught the morning light in subtle ways, not quite dull, not quite reflective. A deep mineral black with hints of silver hidden beneath its surface. One of the attendants stepped forward, carrying a delicate brush. Its handle was slender, its bristles soft and fine. She held it with steady hands. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Every movement was practiced, precise, calm. The room remained silent as she dipped the brush into the dark mixture. For a moment she paused. Then, with remarkable care, she began to apply the kohl. The brush moved slowly, tracing a fine line along the edge of the eye, each motion smooth and deliberate. The touch was so light it seemed almost weightless. The dark line gradually took shape, defining the eye, framing it, giving greater depth to its natural expression. Yet this was never simply a matter of beauty. To the people of ancient Egypt, kohl carried a deeper meaning. It was protection, a sacred practice woven into daily life. For generations, Egyptians believed it shielded the eyes from the harsh brilliance of the desert sun. Many believed it protected against illness, against irritation carried by dust and wind, against unseen dangers that moved through the world beyond human sight. The ritual belonged equally to the physical and the spiritual, both practical and sacred. The same dark lines could be seen throughout Egypt, on nobles and farmers, on priests and merchants, on children and rulers alike. A tradition shared across the kingdom, a small act repeated countless times each morning beneath the same rising sun. The attendant continued her careful The brush glided softly. The movements remained slow, measured, unhurried. Outside, Alexandria was growing brighter. The harbor was beginning to fill with activity. Ships moved upon the water. Voices slowly awakened in distant streets. Yet within the palace chambers, peace still lingered. The scent of Nephi remained in the air. Golden light continued to glow through the alabaster windows. The water in the limestone basin rested perfectly still, and this ancient ritual unfolded exactly as it had for centuries. One quiet gesture after another. When the final touch was complete, the attendant lowered the brush. The alabaster palette remained upon the table, the dark mineral mixture catching a faint glimmer of morning light. Nothing more needed to be done. The ritual was complete, simple, ancient, protective. A small moment of care at the beginning of a new day. And for a few breaths longer, the chamber remained wrapped in silence. As the morning rituals drew gently toward their conclusion, breakfast was brought into the chamber. Not a grand feast, not an elaborate display of wealth, but a quiet meal prepared for the first hours of the day. The attendants moved silently across the limestone floor, their footsteps barely audible. One by one, they placed simple dishes upon a low table near the window. The golden light of morning rested upon everything it touched. A basket of fresh flatbread, a small bowl of dried figs, a dish filled with ruby red pomegranate seeds, and a cup of diluted wine that had cooled throughout the night. The bread was still warm, its surface lightly browned from the oven. When broken apart by hand, a gentle cloud of warmth escaped into the air. The aroma was simple, comforting. The smell of grain, earth, and fire. The kind of scent that had greeted countless mornings across Egypt for generations. Nothing about it was extravagant, yet there was something deeply satisfying in its simplicity. A reminder that even queens began their days with ordinary things. Nearby rested a bowl of dried figs, small, dark, wrinkled by the Egyptian sun, each one holding within it the concentrated sweetness of a long summer. Their flavor arrived slowly, rich and honey-like, lingering pleasantly long after each bite. The pomegranate seeds offered something different, bright, refreshing. Their jewel-like surfaces caught the sunlight and seemed almost aglow. When tasted, they released a delicate burst of sweetness, balanced by a gentle sharpness, like morning itself, fresh, awake, alive. Beside the fruit stood a cup of wine mixed with cool water. In Egypt, wine was rarely consumed undiluted. The mixture had rested overnight within a porous clay vessel. Throughout the darkness, tiny amounts of moisture had evaporated through the clay, naturally cooling the liquid inside. pleasantly cool against the hand, refreshing in the warmth of the growing day. Beyond the window, the city of Alexandria continued to awaken. The harbor was beginning to stir. Sails appeared upon the water. Merchants opened wooden shutters. Voices drifted faintly through distant streets. Yet within the palace, peace remained. The incense still lingered in the air. The alabaster windows continued to glow with soft amber light. And breakfast unfolded without hurry, without interruption. Each taste given its own moment, each breath unhurried, each thought allowed to drift by like a cloud crossing a calm morning sky. For a little while longer, there was nothing to decide, nothing to solve, nothing to anticipate, only warmth, only sunlight, only the quiet comfort of an ordinary morning in ancient Alexandria. When breakfast had come to an end, the attendants quietly cleared the table. The room grew still once more. Only the soft fragrance of kifa remained in the air. Sunlight continued to pour through the alabaster windows, spreading warm amber tones across the stone walls. Outside, Alexandria was fully awake now. Yet from within these chambers, the sounds of the city felt distant, muted, as though they belonged to another world entirely. A servant approached, carrying several scrolls, carefully rolled, bound with narrow cords of linen. She placed them upon a low table beside the window before withdrawing once more into silence. For a few moments, the scrolls remained untouched, resting quietly in the golden morning light. Then one was selected and gently unrolled. The sound was soft, a faint rustle of papyrus, dry, delicate, almost like the sound of leaves moving in a gentle breeze. The scroll slowly revealed lines of dark ink, neat, ordered, patiently written by careful hands. Every symbol carrying meaning, every line carrying a message from somewhere beyond the palace walls. The scent of papyrus mingled with the fragrance of incense, ink, reed fibers, warm stone, sunlight. The room seemed filled with the quiet presence of knowledge, not the hurried knowledge of modern life, not endless information arriving every moment, but something slower, something considered. Each message taking days or weeks to travel across deserts, rivers, and seas before finally reaching Alexandria. Cleopatra lowered her gaze to the scroll. She was known throughout the ancient world for her intelligence. Unlike many rulers of her age, she loved learning. Languages fascinated her. Words fascinated her. It is said that she spoke many languages fluently: Greek, Egyptian, and several others spoken throughout the lands surrounding the Mediterranean. This morning, the reports before her had been written in Greek, the language of the royal court, the language in which Official matters were often discussed. The black ink stood clearly against the pale papyrus, each line precise, each character carefully formed. The morning light illuminated every detail. For several moments, nothing moved, only her eyes passing slowly across the page. Only the gentle sound of papyrus shifting from time to time. Outside, a seabird called somewhere above the harbor. The sound drifted through the open courtyard and faded once more into silence. A faint breeze touched the linen curtains, then disappeared. The city continued its work. Ships arrived. Merchants traded goods. Fishermen returned from the sea. But none of that urgency entered this room. Here there was only calm, only stillness, only the quiet concentration of someone reading carefully. Soon another scroll was opened, this one written in Egyptian, a language many rulers before her had neglected. For generations, the Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt while speaking primarily Greek. Yet Cleopatra had chosen differently. She had learned the language of the people, the language carried by farmers beside the Nile, by merchants in crowded markets, by temple priests greeting the dawn. The translators who worked within the palace noticed this. The people noticed it as well. And perhaps, in quiet moments such as this one, those differences mattered more than anyone could know. The scroll rested open upon the table. The sunlight warmed its surface. Tiny shadows formed where the papyrus fibers crossed one another. The ink seemed almost alive beneath the golden light, and still the reading continued, unhurried, thoughtful, peaceful. The palace remained quiet around her. The incense slowly burned lower. The morning sun climbed higher into the sky. And for a little while longer, the world seemed content to move at the pace of turning pages. One line, one thought, one gentle moment at a time. When the warmth of the day had settled gently across the land, a royal barge drifted upon the Nile. There was no urgency to its movement, no destination that demanded haste. The river itself seemed to decide the pace. The vessel was long and graceful, built from cedar wood brought from distant shores. Its prow was decorated with delicate gilded details that caught the sunlight whenever the river shifted beneath it. Above, an awning of dyed linen provided shade from the afternoon sun. The fabric moved softly whenever a breeze crossed the water. The motion was slow, almost dreamlike. The Nile stretched endlessly in both directions, wide, calm, ancient. The river carried memories older than kingdoms, older than cities, older than the palace walls of Alexandria. The barge moved quietly across its surface. There was almost no sound, only the gentle hiss of water slipping past the hull. a faint wooden knock from somewhere within the vessel, the occasional creak of rope settling under its own weight. Then silence once more, the kind of silence that can only be found upon slow water, the kind of silence that asks nothing from you, nothing at all, simply to watch, simply to drift, simply to be. The sunlight danced across the river, breaking into thousands of moving fragments. No pattern remained for long. Every reflection changed before it could fully form. The surface of the Nile became a world of shifting gold, bright in one moment, soft in the next, always changing, never demanding attention, only inviting quiet observation. The rowers worked gently. Their oars entered the water without splashing, without disturbance. The river accepted each stroke and returned immediately to stillness, as though no movement had happened at all. The world felt suspended, balanced somewhere between motion and rest, between wakefulness and sleep. And the Nile carried everything forward with effortless patience. Beyond the riverbank, the fertile lands of Egypt stretched toward the horizon. From the water, the fields appeared endless, bands of green beneath the golden afternoon sky. Emmer wheat swayed gently in the breeze. Its movement was slow and continuous, like waves crossing a quiet sea. One section leaned with the wind, then another, then another. The motion passed across the landscape in long, unbroken patterns. Nothing abrupt, nothing hurried, only the patient rhythm of growing things. Narrow irrigation channels carried water away from the Nile. They spread across the fields like veins, bringing life to every corner of the land. Their surfaces reflected fragments of sky, small ribbons of silver winding through shades of green and gold. Here and there, a farmer walked slowly along the riverbank. His feet disappeared into the cool water at the edge of the shore. Each step created small ripples, circles expanding quietly across the surface before fading away. The river accepted every movement, then returned once again to calm. The scent of the Nile drifted through the warm air, rich, earthy, ancient, unlike the scent of the sea, unlike the scent of dry desert sand. This was the fragrance of fertile soil, of water and sunlight working together, of life emerging from dark earth year after year. It carried the aroma of wet riverbanks, fresh reeds, green plants warmed by the afternoon sun, a scent that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. The lotus flowers were open now, blue blossoms, white blossoms, floating gently upon still water near the edge of the river. Their roots rested deep within the dark mud below, hidden from sight, while their petals reached upward toward the sunlight. Each flower seemed perfectly at peace, held between earth and sky, between water and light. The blossoms drifted almost imperceptibly with the movement of the river, neither resisting nor following, simply existing exactly where they were. The afternoon passed slowly. The warmth settled across the land, and the Nile continued its endless journey toward the sea. Along the quieter edges of the river, where the water became shallow and still, birds moved through the landscape with unhurried grace. An ibis stood among the reeds, motionless. Its long legs disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Its curved beak pointed toward the river below. For several moments it did not move at all. It seemed less like a living creature and more like part of the landscape itself, a shape carved from the afternoon, a quiet guardian watching over the river. The water flowed gently around its legs. Small ripples formed and disappeared, yet the ibis remained perfectly still, patient, untroubled, content simply to exist within the warmth of the day. Nearby, another waded slowly through the shallows, each step deliberate, measured, creating only the faintest disturbance upon the water. The reeds swayed softly around them, their reflections stretched across the surface below, blurring gently whenever the river moved. Further along the bank, hidden among clusters of papyrus, smaller birds could be heard, rarely seen, almost invisible, their presence announced only by brief sounds. A soft chirp, a rustle among the reeds, then silence once more. The sounds arrived unexpectedly and disappeared just as quickly, like tiny reminders that life surrounded the river in every direction. The papyrus itself moved gently in the breeze, tall green stalks bending and returning upright, bending and returning, again and again. The movement was slow, hypnotic, almost rhythmic. Nothing in this landscape seemed eager to hurry. Nothing competed for attention. Everything moved according to older rhythms, the rhythms of wind, water, sunlight, and time. Then, somewhere above the river, a heron lifted into the air. For a moment there was only stillness, then the sudden sound of wings opening, a sharp crack against the quiet afternoon. The bird rose gracefully from the shallows, its broad wings catching the sunlight, its reflection briefly visible upon the river below. For a few seconds it glided effortlessly above the water, neither climbing nor falling, simply floating upon invisible currents of air. Then it drifted farther downstream, growing smaller against the bright sky, until it became little more than a distant silhouette. And once again, the river returned to silence. The ibis remained where it had stood. The reeds continued their slow dance in the breeze. The papyrus whispered softly against itself, and the Nile carried on, calm, ancient, unchanging, as it had for thousands of years. The afternoon sun now stood high above the Nile. Its warmth settled across the river like a soft blanket. The air had grown still. Even the breeze seemed content to rest for a while. The water moved slowly beneath the barge, not enough to create waves, only small shifts, gentle movements that changed the surface from moment to moment. The sunlight touched the river and immediately broke apart. Thousands upon thousands of fragments of light scattered across the water. No single reflection remained for long. Every sparkle appeared, shimmered, and vanished, only to be replaced by another and another and another. The river became a living tapestry of gold, constantly changing, yet somehow always the same. There was no pattern to follow, nothing to understand, nothing to remember. The light asked nothing of you. It required no effort, no attention, only observation, only presence. You could watch the reflections for hours and never see the same arrangement twice. A single ripple would pass beneath the sunlight. The entire surface would change, then settle, then change again. The brightness drifted across the water like liquid gold poured gently upon glass. Sometimes the reflections gathered together into brilliant patches of light, almost too bright to look at directly. Then, just as quickly, they separated again, breaking into smaller and smaller fragments until they became countless tiny stars dancing upon the river. The shadows moved just as slowly. The awning above the barge cast long shapes across the deck. Patterns of light and shade shifted with the movement of the water below. Nothing remained fixed. Nothing remained permanent. Even the shadows seemed to drift. The cedar wood beneath them glowed warmly in the afternoon sun, golden where the light touched it, cool and soft where the shadows lingered. The contrast felt gentle, comforting, like stepping beneath the shade of a tree on a warm summer day. The river reflected the sky. The sky reflected the river. Sometimes it became difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. Blue merged into gold. Gold merged into silver. Silver disappeared into white. The boundary between water and light seemed to dissolve completely. Time itself felt different here, slower, softer. The minutes no longer arrived one after another. They seemed to stretch, to widen, like circles spreading across still water. There was nowhere to be, nothing waiting ahead, nothing left behind. Only this moment, only sunlight, only water, only the endless conversation between brightness and shadow unfolding upon the Nile. The barge continued its gentle journey. The rowers worked quietly. The river flowed patiently toward the sea, and the afternoon drifted onward in perfect peace. The light continued to dance. The water continued to shimmer, and little by little, thought itself seemed to grow quieter, as though the river had taken it. As the afternoon slowly began to soften, the river seemed to change its mood. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, only the subtle feeling that the day had begun its gentle journey toward evening. The sunlight was no longer directly overhead. It had started its slow descent toward the western horizon. Its color deepened. The bright white light of midday became warmer now, golden, honey-colored, soft. The Nile reflected every change. The surface that had sparkled brightly throughout the afternoon now glowed with a calmer light. The reflections stretched farther across the water, long ribbons of gold drifting upon the slow current. The royal barge had turned toward Alexandria. Now the river itself assisted the journey home. The current moved quietly beneath the hull, steady, patient, ancient. The rowers no longer needed to work as hard. Their movements became slower, more relaxed. Each oar entered the water with barely a sound. A gentle dip, a quiet pull, then stillness again. The river seemed willing to carry everyone the rest of the way. For long stretches of time, there was almost no sound at all. Only the faint hiss of water sliding past cedar wood, the occasional creak of rope, the distant cry of a bird somewhere beyond the reeds. Nothing more, nothing needed. Ahead, far across the water, Alexandria began to emerge from the shimmering afternoon haze. At first, it appeared only as a pale shape against the horizon, almost dreamlike. The city seemed suspended between sky and sea, a distant memory rather than a real place. Gradually, as the barge drifted closer, details began to reveal themselves. White stone buildings caught the afternoon light. Their walls reflected gold and amber tones beneath the descending sun. The city appeared to glow from within. The famous lighthouse stood watch over the harbor, tall, silent, timeless. Its pale surface captured the sunlight more brilliantly than anything around it. The upper stones burned with gold. The lower portions rested in soft shadow. For sailors approaching from distant shores, it must have seemed like a beacon made of sunlight itself. The harbor slowly grew larger, its outlines becoming clearer with every passing moment. Ships rested upon calm water, their masts forming delicate lines against the bright sky. Sails hung quietly in the still air. The city welcomed the evening without hurry, without noise, without urgency. the same way the river welcomed everything patiently, the same way it had welcomed travelers for centuries, the same way it would continue to do so long after this day had passed into memory. The barge continued forward. The city continued to grow. The sun continued its slow descent. Everything moved together. River, light, sky, water, all of it carried by the same gentle rhythm. And as Alexandria drew nearer, the world seemed wrapped in the warm glow that exists only in the final hours before sunset, a glow that softens every edge, a glow that asks nothing from you, a glow that reminds you quietly and without words that the day is coming to a peaceful end. For now there was only the river, only the golden light, only the distant city waiting beyond the water, and the quiet certainty that there was nowhere else you needed to be. The day was beginning to release its final warmth, slowly, almost too gently to notice. The great city of Alexandria, which had been bright beneath the afternoon sun, now appeared wrapped in a softer light. The edges of buildings became less sharp. The colors of stone became deeper. The white marble and pale limestone walls that had reflected the brilliance of the day now carried the quiet glow of gold and amber. Long shadows stretched between columns, across courtyards, along pathways where countless footsteps had passed before. The heat stored within the stone throughout the long Egyptian day slowly returned to the evening air. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, releasing the memory of sunlight one gentle moment at a time. A breeze arrived from the Mediterranean, cooler now, carrying with it the faint taste of salt, the smell of distant water, and the quiet promise that night was approaching. The linen curtains within the palace moved softly, almost imperceptibly, like a slow breath. The gardens, which had rested beneath the strong light of the afternoon, awakened once more. The fragrance of jasmine became stronger as the air cooled. Palm leaves whispered high above the stone pathways. Their shadows moved across the ground like slow-moving patterns painted by the fading sun. The fountains continued their endless conversation with the silence around them. Water falling into water, the same sound it had made yesterday, the same sound it would make tomorrow, a rhythm that belonged to no single day, only to time itself. Somewhere in the distance, the final ships entered the harbor, their sails now colored by the setting sun. The voices of sailors carried softly across the water, too far away to understand, only gentle sounds drifting through the evening air. Nothing that required attention, nothing that asked to be remembered. The great lighthouse watched over everything, its towering form standing between the sea and the sky. The final light of the sun touched its upper stones. For a few precious moments, it seemed to burn with fire. Not a fire of destruction, but the quiet fire of the evening sun saying goodbye to another day. The sky slowly changed its colors. Gold became orange, orange became rose, rose became a deep and peaceful blue. One color surrendering itself to the next, without struggle, without haste. The first stars had not yet appeared, but the world was already preparing a place for them. And somewhere within the palace, the lamps would soon be lit, small flames waiting inside simple vessels of oil, tiny suns created by human hands to accompany the coming darkness. But for now, there was still a little sunlight left, a few final moments suspended between day and night, a time when the world seemed to become quieter, softer, more forgiving. And as Alexandria settled beneath the gentle embrace of evening, there was nothing you needed to do, nothing waiting for you, nothing left unfinished, only the fading warmth of stone, the scent of jasmine, the distant sound of water, and the peaceful certainty that the night was arriving exactly as it should. As the final rays of sunlight slipped quietly beyond the western horizon, another familiar ritual began within the palace, one that had welcomed the coming of evening for generations. The great hall slowly surrendered the last of the daylight. The golden glow that had filled every room only moments before became softer now, gentler. The shadows grew longer, stretching silently across polished limestone floors, climbing the carved columns, settling into quiet corners where daylight no longer reached. No one hurried to chase the darkness away. Evening was never an interruption. It was simply another gentle chapter in the rhythm of the day. One of the attendants entered carrying a small bronze tray. Upon it rested several simple oil lamps, each one carefully shaped from smooth clay, each one holding a small pool of clear olive oil. From the center of every lamp, a single linen wick rested quietly, waiting. The attendant paused beside the first lamp. She lowered a tiny, glowing ember toward the wick. For a moment, nothing happened. The wick darkened. A faint thread of smoke curled upward. almost invisible against the deepening light of evening. Then a tiny flame appeared, small enough to fit upon the tip of a finger. It trembled gently, finding its balance, breathing for the very first time. The oil slowly warmed beneath it. The flame became steadier, brighter, without ever becoming harsh. Its light was soft, amber, comforting. The attendant moved silently through the chamber, lighting one lamp after another, each new flame adding only a little more light, never too much. The palace did not become bright. It became peaceful. The last colors of sunset faded beyond the windows. Now the lamps carried the evening forward. Their warm glow rested upon the pale stone walls, touched polished wooden tables, caught the delicate edges of woven linen. Every surface seemed transformed. Hard stone became gentle. Sharp corners softened. The palace felt quieter than ever before. The little flames moved almost constantly. Not because of wind, there was almost none, but because every flame has its own quiet life. A slight movement, a gentle sway, a tiny dance that never truly stops. Their light painted slow-moving shadows upon the walls. Columns seemed to breathe. The carved patterns in the stone appeared almost alive. Palm leaves beyond the open courtyard cast delicate silhouettes that drifted lazily across the floor. Nothing remained completely still, yet nothing disturbed the silence. Somewhere nearby, the fountain continued its endless song. Water meeting water, drop after drop, exactly as it had throughout the day. Only now the sound seemed softer. The evening had changed the way everything was heard. The scent of warm olive oil joined the lingering fragrance of kefi. Jasmine drifted in from the palace gardens. The cool breath of the Mediterranean carried hints of salt across the open courtyards. Every breath felt slower now, deeper, calmer. Outside, Alexandria continued its quiet descent into night. The harbor lights began to appear one by one. Tiny reflections shimmered upon the darkening sea. The great lighthouse still stood above them all, its pale stone now glowing beneath the final colors of twilight. Within the palace, no one spoke. There was no need for words. The lamps had been lit. The day had gently come to its end, and without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened, the world had become a place of quiet amber light, a place where the night could finally begin. For a little while, no one moved. The lamps had all been lit, their small amber flames rested quietly throughout the palace chambers, each one adding only the gentlest measure of light. The brilliance of the day had disappeared completely now. What remained was softer, kinder. The world no longer asked to be seen in every detail. Instead, it invited the eyes to relax, to notice less, to imagine more. The polished limestone floors reflected the glow of the lamps in muted shades of gold. The reflections were never perfectly still. Each tiny flame moved with its own quiet rhythm. A slight tremble, a gentle sway, almost too small to notice, yet enough to make every shadow breathe. The carved columns seemed alive beneath the flickering light, not changing, not moving, only appearing different each time the flame shifted ever so slightly. The painted walls carried stories from another age, images of lotus flowers, papyrus reeds, sacred birds standing beside the waters of the Nile. In the daylight, every detail could be seen clearly, but now the lamps revealed only fragments: a feather, a flower, the outline of a hand. The rest disappeared peacefully into shadow. Perhaps the imagination has always preferred evening to daylight. Some things become more beautiful when they are only partly seen. Beyond the open courtyard, the evening breeze wandered quietly through the royal gardens. The palm trees answered with a soft whisper, leaves brushing gently against one another, a sound so delicate that it almost blended with silence itself. Nearby, jasmine flowers had fully opened. Throughout the warmth of the day, they had waited. Now, beneath the cooling sky, their fragrance slowly filled the air. Sweet, gentle, never overwhelming, only enough to remind anyone passing by that night had its own quiet gifts. The fountain continued its endless song, water slipping over smooth stone, droplets falling into a still basin below. The rhythm never changed, drop after drop, moment after moment, exactly the same, and yet somehow never quite identical. A servant passed through the corridor carrying another small oil lamp. Its warm circle of light traveled slowly across the floor. For a brief moment, the nearby walls brightened. The carved patterns became clearer. The polished stone shimmered softly. Then, as she disappeared around the corner, the light moved with her. The shadows gently returned. Nothing had been disturbed, only borrowed, only shared. High above the palace, the sky deepened into a rich velvet blue. The first evening star appeared above the Mediterranean. then another, then another. Not all at once, patiently, as though the heavens themselves understood there was no need to hurry. Within the palace, the quiet had become something almost tangible. It surrounded every room, every hallway, every courtyard, like a soft blanket laid gently across the ancient stone. The conversations of the day had faded. The footsteps had become fewer. Even the air itself seemed to move more slowly. The palace was preparing for rest. And without realizing it, perhaps you were as well. The evening settled gently over the palace, not as a curtain falling, but as a slow breath. One quiet moment blending into the next, until daylight became only a memory. The last warmth lingered within the ancient stone. The limestone walls, which had gathered the sun throughout the day, released it little by little into the cooling air. If you rested your hand upon one of the great columns, you would still feel the gentle warmth of the afternoon. Not hot, not cold, only comfortable. The kind of warmth that asks nothing of you except to remain where you are. Beyond the palace doors, the royal gardens had become a different world. During the day, they belonged to the sun. Now they belonged to the moon. White limestone pathways reflected the soft silver light above. Every step seemed quieter here. The gravel beneath gentle sandals made almost no sound, only the faintest whisper. Palm trees stood motionless against the evening sky. Their long leaves occasionally stirred as a breeze wandered inland from the Mediterranean. It carried coolness across the gardens, a touch of salt from the sea, the distant freshness of open water, and the quiet fragrance of night-blooming flowers. The lotus ponds had become mirrors. The water was so still that it reflected the stars with remarkable clarity. For a moment, it became difficult to tell where the heavens ended and the water began. White lotus blossoms floated peacefully upon the surface. Their petals had begun to close for the night. Slowly, patiently, one delicate layer after another, as though each flower understood that every living thing deserves its own time of rest. Nearby, blue lotus flowers remained open a little longer. Their pale petals shimmered beneath the moonlight. The broad green leaves beneath them drifted almost imperceptibly. Small circles formed where fish disturbed the water below. The ripples widened, touched the flowers, then disappeared into perfect stillness once more. The scent of jasmine had grown stronger, It drifted gently through the gardens without announcing itself, never overwhelming, only present, like a quiet companion walking beside you. Somewhere among the flowering shrubs, a single night bird called into the darkness. Its voice echoed softly across the palace walls. Then silence returned. Not empty silence, living silence, filled with the distant movement of leaves, the whisper of water, the quiet breathing of the earth after a warm day. Above, the stars continued to appear, one by one. The moon climbed a little higher. Its light rested upon the palace roofs, upon marble statues, upon the still waters of the pools. Everything seemed softer beneath its silver glow. The world no longer belonged to daylight. It belonged to rest, to reflection, to peaceful thoughts that asked for no answers. If you stood here long enough, you might forget the passing of time altogether. Minutes no longer mattered, neither did hours. There was only the cool evening air, the fragrance of jasmine, the gentle light upon the water, and the quiet certainty that the ancient city, like every living thing, was slowly preparing itself for sleep. The night settled more deeply over Alexandria. Within the palace, the final tasks of the day quietly came to an end. There were no announcements, no bells, no signal that the day was over. Only small moments, one after another. A servant gently closed a pair of cedar doors. The wood met the stone frame with the softest sound, almost a whisper. The sound lingered for a moment through the corridor, then disappeared into silence. Farther away, another lamp was carefully adjusted. The flame had burned a little lower. A few drops of fresh olive oil were added. The tiny light brightened once more, then settled into its slow, steady dance. In the kitchens, the warmth of the ovens was beginning to fade. The scent of fresh bread had given way to the quiet fragrance of cooling stone. Clay bowls rested where they had been washed. Copper vessels reflected the amber light of distant lamps. Everything had found its place. The corridors that had welcomed visitors throughout the day now stood almost empty. The polished limestone floors reflected only pools of warm light beneath each lamp. Between them lay soft shadows, peaceful shadows, the kind that invite silence rather than hide it. Outside, the gardens had become even quieter. The evening breeze moved through the palm leaves once more. Their gentle whisper rose and faded, rose and faded, like slow breathing. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the Nile continued its endless journey toward the sea. Though it could no longer be seen, it could almost be imagined, always flowing, always patient, always there. Above the city, more stars appeared, one by one, until the heavens seemed filled with quiet points of light. The moon climbed higher. Its silver glow rested upon rooftops, courtyards, and silent columns. Even the great lighthouse seemed calmer now. Its bright beacon turned steadily across the dark sea, watching over ships that would continue their journeys through the night. Within the royal chambers, conversation had given way to quiet reflection. No footsteps echoed through the halls. No hurried voices called from one room to another. The palace had entered that rare hour when nearly everyone had withdrawn into stillness. It was as though the building itself had taken a long, slow breath and decided to hold it. Nothing demanded attention anymore. Nothing remained unfinished that could not wait until morning. The worries of tomorrow had not yet arrived. The responsibilities of yesterday had already passed. Only this quiet hour remained, a single peaceful moment suspended between 2 days. The lamps continued to glow. The stars continued to shine. The Nile continued to flow. And somewhere, beyond thought and beyond memory, the ancient city slowly surrendered itself to sleep. As the palace settled into silence, another quiet ritual began. Not one performed before priests, not one witnessed by ambassadors or advisors. This was a quieter ceremony, one known only to the evening and to the few trusted attendants who remained. The great halls of the palace were now behind her. The voices of the day had faded. The business of ruling an empire would wait until morning. One by one, the heavy cedar doors closed softly behind her. Each gentle sound seemed to leave another part of the day outside, until at last only her private chambers remained. The room welcomed the evening with quiet simplicity. The walls were pale limestone, softened by the amber glow of oil lamps. Their light reached only partway into the room. The corners rested peacefully in shadow. Fine linen curtains hung beside the open windows. They rose and settled almost imperceptibly as the cool breeze from the Mediterranean wandered through the chamber. The air carried the faint scent of salt, jasmine from the palace gardens, and the last traces of Kaifi incense lingering somewhere in the distance. Nothing felt hurried here. Nothing felt ceremonial. This was no longer the chamber of a queen receiving visitors. It had become simply a place of rest. An attendant stepped forward carrying a shallow alabaster tray. Upon it rested the ornaments of the day. Without a word, she waited. Cleopatra gently lifted the broad golden collar from her shoulders. It had rested there since morning. Beautiful, impressive, yet undeniably heavy. The polished gold caught the light one final time before being placed upon the smooth stone tray. A soft, delicate sound, barely louder than a whisper. Next came the bracelets, one after another. Each slipped carefully from her wrists. The tiny movement released a quiet sense of ease, as though the weight of the day itself had become just a little lighter. The rings followed, then the earrings, each piece laid carefully upon folded linen, not discarded, not forgotten, simply allowed to rest until another sunrise. Nothing glittered quite as brightly beneath lamplight as it had beneath the afternoon sun. The gold had become warmer now, softer. Its brilliance no longer demanded attention. It simply shared the quiet of the room. An attendant unfolded a length of the finest linen, light as air, cool to the touch, freshly woven. The fabric carried the clean scent of sun-dried flax, warmed only slightly by the evening air. For a few peaceful moments, no one spoke. There was no need. The silence itself had become part of the ritual. Outside, somewhere beyond the open windows, the fountain continued its gentle conversation with the night. Water falling upon water, steady, unchanging. The sound had followed the palace through every hour of the day. Now, in the stillness of evening, it seemed even softer, almost as though it, too, were growing sleepy. Stepped quietly toward the bronze mirror. Its polished surface reflected the warm glow of the oil lamps more softly than daylight ever could. Nothing appeared sharp, only gentle shapes, gentle light, gentle shadows. The queen took her place before it, not as a ruler, not as the daughter of a dynasty, but simply as someone whose long day had finally come to an end. For a few peaceful moments, no one moved. The silence itself seemed welcome. Then, with slow and practiced hands, the attendant reached for the first golden pin. It had held the intricate hairstyle in place since the early hours of the morning. Carefully, she lifted it free. The pin made the faintest sound as it rested upon the alabaster tray. Then came another, and another, each removed with the same quiet patience, each one releasing just a little more of the carefully arranged hair. Nothing was hurried. There was no reason to hurry now. The day had already asked everything it needed to ask. One by one, the final pins were laid beside the jewelry that already rested upon folded linen. Gradually, the carefully arranged coils began to loosen. A few dark strands slipped gently across her shoulders. Others followed, until, little by little, her hair fell naturally down her back. The attendant picked up a comb carved from polished ivory. Its smooth teeth passed slowly through the long, dark hair. One gentle stroke, then another, never pulling, never rushing, only guiding. The quiet sound was almost impossible to hear, a delicate whisper, like silk moving across silk. Each slow movement seemed to smooth away another thought from the day, another responsibility, another decision left behind. The evening asked nothing more of her now, only stillness, only rest. Outside the open window, the Mediterranean breeze wandered softly into the chamber. It lifted a few loose strands for only a moment before letting them settle once again. The cool air carried the fragrance of jasmine from the gardens below. Somewhere farther away, the fountain continued its endless rhythm, water touching water, steady, peaceful, unchanging. The attendant placed the comb aside. For a little while, nothing happened. The room simply remained quiet. The lamps glowed with their gentle amber light. The linen curtains rose and fell with the evening breeze. The stars shone beyond the open window, and in the calm reflection of the bronze mirror, the woman who had spent the day as Queen Cleopatra now looked simply like someone ready to leave the weight of the world until morning. For perhaps the greatest luxury in any age is not gold, nor power, nor beautiful palaces, but the quiet certainty that, for one peaceful night, nothing more is required of you, only to breathe, only to rest, only to let the night carry you gently toward sleep. The chamber had grown wonderfully quiet. Outside, the gardens rested beneath the stars. Inside, the gentle light of the oil lamps painted the room in soft shades of amber and gold. Nothing felt hurried anymore. The day had finally released its hold. One of the attendants approached, carrying a small alabaster vessel. It was no larger than the palm of her hand. Its smooth surface had been polished until it glowed softly beneath the lamplight. She placed it carefully upon the low cedar table. For a few moments, neither of them reached for it. The room remained perfectly still. Only the quiet murmur of the fountain drifted through the open window. Only the distant whisper of palm leaves moving in the night breeze. At last, the small vessel was opened, its lid lifted with barely a sound. A delicate fragrance slowly escaped into the warm evening air. Gentle, floral, almost impossible to describe completely. There were soft notes that reminded one of fresh water at sunrise. Others carried the sweetness of blossoms warmed by the Egyptian sun. Nothing sharp, nothing overwhelming, only a fragrance that seemed to belong to stillness itself. Among the flowers cherished in ancient Egypt, few were admired more than the blue lotus. Its blossoms opened with the daylight and rested again as evening returned. For generations, poets, artists, and temple musicians had celebrated its quiet beauty. Its image appeared upon painted walls, upon carved stone, upon finely crafted jewelry. It became a symbol not only of beauty, but of renewal, of peaceful beginnings following restful nights. The attendant placed a single drop of fragrant oil upon her fingertips. Only one. No more was needed. She gently touched Cleopatra's wrists. The cool oil rested lightly against the skin before slowly warming. Its fragrance rose almost imperceptibly. Then another small drop behind each ear, where the evening breeze occasionally wandered through the open window. The scent mingled with jasmine from the gardens below, with warm olive oil from the lamps, with the faint breath of the Mediterranean carried across the palace walls. None of the fragrances competed with one another. They simply existed together, like quiet voices sharing the same peaceful room. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence had become its own companion. The small alabaster vessel remained open upon the table. Its polished surface reflected the tiny flames nearby, each flicker of light appearing and disappearing like distant stars upon calm water. The room itself seemed to breathe. The curtains rose gently, then settled, rose again, then rested. The lamps burned steadily, The fountain continued its endless song, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, the Nile flowed patiently beneath the night sky. The same river that had carried the morning into day now carried the day gently into night. Cleopatra closed her eyes for just a moment, not yet to sleep, only to breathe, to notice the cool evening air, the quiet fragrance surrounding her, the warmth of the lamps, the stillness of the room. There was nothing left to decide, nothing left to prepare, nothing left to carry, only the peaceful certainty that the night had finally arrived and that it would hold the world safely until morning. There was no display of royal splendor, no unnecessary ornament, only quiet elegance, only comfort. The bed rested upon a low wooden frame, crafted by skilled hands many years before. Its polished cedar carried the faint, familiar fragrance of warm wood, softened by countless seasons. Across it lay fine linen, fresh, smooth, woven so carefully that it seemed almost weightless. The fabric had been aired during the day, allowing the warmth of the Egyptian sun to leave behind only the clean scent of flax and open air. The pillows were generously filled with soft feathers, not so high that they lifted the head, only enough to offer gentle support. The linen covering had been folded back in quiet preparation for the night. Everything waited patiently, as though the room itself understood there was no reason to hurry. A single oil lamp rested upon a carved wooden stand nearby. Unlike the lamps in the great halls, this one was small. Its flame rose only a little above the edge of the clay vessel. It burned steadily, casting a warm circle of amber light across the linen. The rest of the room dissolved gently into shadow. Nothing needed to be brighter than this. Beyond the open window, the Mediterranean breeze continued its slow journey through the palace. It entered quietly, crossed the room without disturbing anything, then disappeared once more into the night. The linen curtains answered with the gentlest movement, rising, settling, rising again, almost as though the room itself were breathing. The fragrance of jasmine still lingered in the air, fainter now, more distant, blending with the warm scent of cedar wood, with the quiet aroma of olive oil from the lamp, with the cool freshness carried from the sea. The sounds of Alexandria had nearly disappeared. No merchants, no voices, no footsteps upon the palace courts. Only the distant fountain, steady, patient, its water falling with the same rhythm it had followed since sunrise. Far beyond the palace walls, somewhere hidden within the darkness, the Nile continued its endless journey toward the sea. It flowed exactly as it always had, exactly as it always would, without haste, without effort, without ever asking to be noticed. For a long while, the room remained exactly as it was, still, warm, peaceful, waiting without expectation, as though it already knew that before many more, for a little while longer, Cleopatra remained by the open window. She did not speak. She did not call for anyone. There was nothing left that required her attention. The evening breeze touched her face with quiet kindness, cooler now than it had been only an hour before. It carried the familiar scent of the Mediterranean, salt, fresh water, and the distant promise of another peaceful dawn that would come in its own time. She rested one hand lightly upon the smooth limestone beside the window. The stone still held a trace of the day's warmth. Not much, only enough to remember the afternoon sun. Above the palace, the night sky stretched endlessly. The stars appeared brighter now, no longer competing with the fading light of evening. They filled the heavens one by one, quietly, patiently, as they had done every night for countless generations. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the great lighthouse watched over the harbor. Its beacon turned slowly across the dark sea, a silent guide for ships that continued their journeys beneath the stars. Its distant light appeared for a moment, then disappeared, then returned once more, steady, faithful, unhurried. Far below, the gardens rested beneath silver moonlight. The lotus ponds reflected the stars as clearly as polished glass. Palm leaves whispered softly whenever the sea breeze wandered through them. The fountain continued its endless song, drop after drop, moment after moment, exactly the same, exactly enough. Cleopatra closed her eyes, only for a breath, then another. She listened, not for voices, not for music, but for the quiet sounds that remained after every busy day had finally ended. The breeze, the water, the distant sea, the soft crackle of the lamp behind her, the gentle rhythm of her own breathing. There is a special kind of silence that comes only at the very end of the day. Not empty, not lonely. A silence that feels complete. A silence that asks nothing more of anyone. Perhaps this was that silence. She opened her eyes once more and looked across Alexandria. The city no longer belonged to work, nor to ceremony, nor to ambition. It belonged to the night. The rooftops shimmered beneath the moon. The harbor had grown quiet. The streets rested. Even the palace, so full of life only hours before, now seemed to breathe slowly around her. She allowed herself one final look at the sleeping city, not because she wished to remember it, but because it had become part of this peaceful evening, part of this gentle ending. Then, with unhurried steps, she turned away from the window. The curtains drifted softly behind her. The moonlight remained where it was. The breeze continued its endless journey through the open window. Nothing had changed. Nothing needed to change. The night would continue its quiet work until morning. And now, it was time to rest. The chamber remained wrapped in gentle amber light. Nothing had changed. The lamp still burned quietly beside the bed. The curtains continued their slow dance with the evening breeze. Beyond the open window, the fountain whispered its endless song into the night. Cleopatra crossed the room without haste. The smooth limestone beneath her feet still held the last memory of the day's warmth. Each step was soft, measured, unhurried. There was no longer any destination beyond this room, no audience waiting beyond another doorway, no messenger expected before dawn. The night belonged only to stillness. She paused beside the bed for a moment, not because there was anything left to do, but because quiet moments often ask us to pause without reason. The linen reflected the warm light of the nearby lamp. Its surface looked almost like calm water beneath the moon, smooth, fresh, inviting. She rested her fingertips lightly upon the fabric. It felt cool after the warmth of the stone, soft beneath her hand. The fine threads had been woven with extraordinary care, strong enough to last for years, gentle enough to welcome peaceful sleep. The room itself seemed to breathe. The curtains rose, then settled. The lamp flickered once, then became still again. Outside, somewhere beyond the palace gardens, the sea continued its endless conversation with the shore. Too distant to hear clearly, yet somehow always present. She lowered herself slowly onto the edge of the bed. The cedar frame answered with the faintest sound, a quiet reminder that even wood remembers the passing of time. The feather-filled cushions yielded gently beneath her weight. The linen gathered into soft folds. Everything welcomed rest. Nothing resisted it. For a little while, she simply remained there, hands resting quietly, shoulders no longer carrying the weight of the day. Her breathing found its own gentle rhythm, slow, even, peaceful. The amber light reached only as far as it needed. Beyond it, the room faded into soft shadow. There was comfort in not seeing everything. The mind no longer searched for details. It no longer wandered from one thought to another. It simply rested where it was. The fragrance of jasmine drifted once more through the open window. Fainter now, almost like a memory. The blue lotus oil still lingered upon her wrists. Only the lightest trace remained. It rose gently each time she breathed. The fountain continued its patient rhythm. The breeze continued its quiet journey. The stars continued their silent watch above Alexandria. Everything that had welcomed the morning had also welcomed the night. Nothing had been hurried. Nothing had been forgotten. The day had unfolded exactly as days have always unfolded, beginning with light, ending in peace. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, the Nile continued its endless journey toward the sea, calm, faithful, unchanging, as though it were gently carrying the whole world toward morning. Within the chamber, the lamp burned softly. The room was warm. The night was kind. And for the first time since sunrise, there was absolutely nothing left to do, only to rest, only to breathe, only to allow the quiet hours of the night to unfold one peaceful moment at a time. For another quiet moment, nothing happened. The lamp continued to glow beside the bed. Its small flame neither brightened nor faded. It simply existed, steady, patient. The room no longer felt like part of a palace. It felt like a place outside of time, a place where the day had gently come to rest. Cleopatra drew one slow breath, then another, without thinking about it, without trying to change it. The rhythm came naturally, as the sea finds its own tide, as the Nile finds its own path. She slowly lifted her feet onto the bed. The fine linen welcomed the movement without a sound. The fabric remained cool against her skin, smooth beneath her fingertips, light enough to feel almost weightless. She lowered herself little by little until her head rested upon the feather-filled pillow. It yielded gently beneath her, finding its shape without resistance, supporting without pressing, like calm water accepting a floating leaf. For a few moments, her eyes remained open. The ceiling above disappeared into soft shadow beyond the reach of the lamp. Here and there, tiny movements of light drifted across the stone. The flame was dancing so gently that the shadows seemed almost alive, not restless, only breathing. The curtains rose once more, a slow movement, then settled again. The breeze crossed the room exactly as it had all evening, faithful, unchanging. Somewhere outside, a palm leaf brushed another. The sound was so soft, it barely disturbed the silence. Then even that faded. The fountain continued its quiet rhythm, water meeting water, again and again, always the same, always different. Far beyond the palace, the Mediterranean stretched beneath the stars. The waves touched the shore without asking to be heard. The Nile continued its endless journey through the darkness, flowing beneath the same moon, the same stars, as it had long before this night, and as it would long after. Cleopatra felt the quiet weight of the linen blanket drawn lightly across her. Not heavy, only comforting, like the first cool breath after a warm day. Her hands rested peacefully, no longer holding scrolls, no longer greeting visitors, no longer carrying the symbols of a queen, simply resting. The room asked nothing more of her. The palace asked nothing more. The city asked nothing more. Even tomorrow remained silent, waiting patiently beyond the horizon. There would be another sunrise, another morning breeze, another day upon the Nile. But none of those moments belonged to now. Now belonged to the night. Her breathing slowed almost without notice, each breath arriving a little more gently than the one before. Each exhale carrying away another small piece of the day, until thoughts themselves became lighter, like feathers carried by the evening breeze, like lotus petals floating upon still water. Above the palace, the stars continued their silent journey across the heavens. Below them, Alexandria rested, the harbor rested, the gardens rested, the fountains whispered, the lamps glowed, the river flowed. And within the quiet chamber, there was nothing left to become, nothing left to remember, nothing left to hold. Only this peaceful night, only this gentle breath, only rest. The night continued quietly around the palace. Nothing hurried, nothing called for attention. The lamp beside the bed still offered its gentle amber light. Its flame moved so slightly that it was almost impossible to tell whether it moved at all. Outside, the moon had climbed higher into the heavens. Its silver light rested upon the rooftops of Alexandria, upon the quiet streets, upon the harbor where ships floated peacefully beside their moorings. Their ropes rose and fell almost imperceptibly with the slow breathing of the sea. The great lighthouse continued its silent work. Its beacon turned patiently across the dark water. A circle of light, then darkness, then light once more, again and again, exactly as it had done through countless nights before this one. The Mediterranean answered with its own quiet rhythm. Gentle waves touched the shore, then slipped away, only to return again. The sound was too distant to hear clearly, yet somehow it could still be felt, as though the whole coastline breathed in long, peaceful rhythms. Far beyond the city walls, the Nile continued its endless journey. invisible now beneath the darkness, yet always present. Its waters moved with the same quiet certainty that had carried them through thousands of years. The river did not hurry toward tomorrow. It simply flowed, one gentle moment after another. The palm trees rested beneath the stars. Their leaves no longer whispered as often. Even the breeze seemed ready for sleep. The jasmine still carried its delicate fragrance through the gardens, lighter now, almost fading into the cool night air. Within the palace, every corridor remained silent. Every doorway rested in shadow. The lamps burned lower, one by one, not disappearing, only growing softer, as though the palace itself wished to dream. The fountain never stopped. Its water continued falling into the quiet basin, drop after drop, the same sound, the same gentle rhythm, hour after hour, night after night, year after year. Some sounds are so constant that they become part of silence itself. Perhaps this was one of them. Above everything, above the palace, above Alexandria, above the Nile, the stars continued their ancient journey. They asked nothing of the earth below. They simply shone, patiently, quietly, without expectation. And beneath those same stars, the palace rested, the gardens rested, the harbor rested, the city rested, and somewhere within its quiet walls, Cleopatra rested too. The world had become wonderfully still, wonderfully gentle, wonderfully calm. Nothing needed to happen now. The night was already complete, exactly as it was. The night had become wonderfully still. Nothing asked to be changed. Nothing asked to be finished. The lamp glowed softly. Its gentle light rested quietly beside the bed. Beyond the open window, the evening breeze drifted through the palace gardens. It touched the jasmine. It passed across the lotus ponds. It moved gently through the palm leaves, then quietly found its way into the chamber once again. The fountain whispered softly. Each drop met the water below. Each ripple faded into perfect calm. No sound hurried after another. Every moment unfolded gently. The stars shone quietly above the sleeping city. Far beyond the palace walls, the Nile flowed beneath the moonlight. Its waters reflected the quiet sky. The light shimmered gently upon the surface. Always peaceful, always calm. The palace rested. The great halls rested. The quiet gardens rested. The shaded courtyards rested. Even the ancient stone seemed to breathe with the cool night air. Within the chamber, only one gentle rhythm remained. Slow breathing, easy breathing, peaceful breathing. The lamp still glowed. The breeze still drifted. The fountain still whispered. The river still flowed. The stars still shone. Everything had found its peaceful place. The air remained cool. The linen remained soft. The light remained warm. Nothing disturbed the silence. Only gentle light. Only quiet air. Only peaceful stillness. And only rest. Always rest.